I first read Against Heresies by Irenaeus about 10 years ago, and then I stopped at the end of book one out of five. Why did I stop at the first of five? Because this book is nuts. It's crazy, bizarro world stuff, and I didn't want to read anymore. But after reading Michael Spiegel's Fathers on the Future, I thought it was time to give Irenaeus a second read, and this time go through all five books. One of my goals in the series is to give new titles to each of Irenaeus's books to reflect their content. Calling them books 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 doesn't really help you much to know about the content inside of them. So this review will give you an overview of book one along with my title for it, with a warning that I may change the titles after I've finished reading all five. One reason I want to do this is that separating Irenaeus into five books and instead of viewing Against Heresies as one big book allows the works of Irenaeus to be very approachable. So this book it's a little hefty, it's a little big, but once you recognize that this is five books, each book is 90 to 150 pages, then you're like, I could do that. I could read 90 pages, 150, easy. Especially if you decide to skip book one. Skip book one, you might say. Why would I skip the first one? Because book one of Against Heresies, and right now I'm going with the working title of A Spotlight on Gnosticism. The purpose of book one is to expose the Christian world to a broad overview of Gnostic teachings, with the hopes that once they are brought to the light, instead of being tempted to fall for the so-called deeper knowledge of Gnosticism, the Christian will see all of this stuff is just plain crazy. Now, most people can skip this book because it's an overview of a pretty insane religion that no one holds today. So instead of reading book one for yourself and putting that spotlight on Gnosticism, allow me to give you a brief overview of what the Gnostic believed and a couple of lessons from Irenaeus himself. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more books that will help you to learn about the earliest authors of church history, please subscribe to the channel in order to stay up to date with my current reviews. Also, like this video, give it that thumbs up, and share it with others to help them know about the works of the ancient church fathers. So first, what did the Gnostics believe according to Irenaeus? There's no concise way really to bring this out in a review because Irenaeus in this book is pulling from multiple Gnostic traditions. And he even covered the different ways that the groups contradicted each other when talking about how this world came into existence and how they view the nature of Jesus Christ. Irenaeus wrote on how the Gnostics are contradictory among themselves. So you might hear some things about the Gnostics in this video and be like, oh wait, I thought they taught something else about that. Well, someone else that was a Gnostic may have. So what I've pulled out of this video isn't incorrect according to Irenaeus, but if you hear something different about the Gnostics, it just kind of points to the fact that they don't have unified beliefs. Their internal contradictions was another way that pointed to the fact that, as Irenaeus tries to show, this is just an insane religion. Now, they have a few broad commonalities. They believed in a multitude of gods, but instead of giving them names like Zeus or Apollos, they called them Father, Wisdom, Christ, Truth. Although some were given unique names, for the most part, these gods were given names that aligned with Christian terminology. And most of them believed that the physical world was evil. For instance, Jesus was virgin born, but since the Christ couldn't be part of flesh because that would make him evil, the Christ came upon Jesus and then left Jesus before his death on the cross. But then interestingly enough, even the man Jesus wasn't crucified because that would be too fleshly, so instead he tricked Joseph of Arimathea to die in his place, which turns out to be very similar to Islam's view of the crucifixion. I think the key to understanding Gnosticism, as much as it could be understood, is in the nature of how they view Jesus and the crucifixion. The Christ was one divine being. Jesus was a distinct person then wisdom would be another divine being. And the divine is separate from the physical as much as possible. So Gnosticism is Christian terminology brought into the world of polytheism with weird views about the separation of the physical and the spiritual. The Gnostics also teach that Jesus didn't bodily rise from the dead, but the disciples were mistaken when it came to the bodily resurrection. Instead, the Christ rose spiritually and then ascended into heaven according to their teachings. The Gnostics also loved numerology. They would take, for instance, the name Jesus, which has 6 letters in the Greek. They would then designate each letter to align with a different number. Therefore, for them, the name Jesus equals the number 24. And then they gave significance to each number so they could go and tell the story of the biblical narrative and then say, oh, we have the deeper meaning of that narrative based on how numbers appear in the text. So they'll be like, here's a significance of 6 or 7 or 12 or 24 or 30. For some reason, they were big fans of the number 30. So I see Gnosticism as an attempt to meld old polytheistic paganism and numerology with biblical terminology. It was people who wanted their magic, they wanted their view that the flesh was evil, and their multiple gods, and to bring that into the growing Christian culture. Now, thankfully, there are no Gnostics today. I don't believe anyone in the 21st century would fall under the designation of Gnosticism. Calling anyone a Gnostic is simply uncalled for. No one believes that Eve was used in the garden, becoming the mother of all angels before the fall. But at the same time, people do hold individual views that are very similar to the Gnostics. I already gave an example with Islam and the crucifixion. The Gnostics also held to a strong view of election. They even called themselves the seed of election. And it's a good way, because it's a good way to draw someone in, appeal to their pride, but by letting them know you're the chosen ones. And sadly, many in the Reformed Church hold to a similar view of election. But while they may overlap with the Gnostics in that one area, they are in no way Gnostics themselves. I believe it is wise for teachers and church leaders to know about the views of the Gnostics so that we make sure that nothing that we're teaching from the church overlaps with what they believed and they took out of the scriptures. We should have no common ground with the Gnostics. And there are also some good teachings by Irenaeus scattered throughout Book 1. My favorite was when he used an illustration from the writings of Homer. Irenaeus went and put together random lines from Homer's writings in order to make Homer say something that he never intended to communicate. And Irenaeus used this to warn about the danger of teachers who pull quotes from different contexts of the Bible and then put them together to try to make the Bible say something that the biblical authors did not intend. It was a good lesson on making sure that the context of each passage, each verse, supports what it is that we're teaching. The other interesting point was when Irenaeus drew attention to the fact that the disciples were mistaken or lied about the bodily resurrection according to the Gnostics. I believe this is a major defense for the bodily resurrection because even the Gnostics, who in time, the Gnostics were relatively close to the event of the resurrection of Jesus. And they felt like they couldn't get away with the lie in order to say, oh, the disciples also taught that Jesus only rose spiritually. They knew, based on what they had today, that the disciples taught a bodily resurrection, and so they had to say that the disciples were lying. Now, I think that's enough when it comes to Irenaeus and the Gnostics for now. Against Heresy, Book 1. This is an important read for church leaders and teachers, but I think the majority of the church, they can probably skip this overview of Gnosticism and just stick with the cliff notes, either from this video or learning for somebody else. But I hope that you've learned something today in this spotlight on Gnosticism from Irenaeus.